you mentioned karma, and karma is really the key here.
I want to spend some time after the break, too, David, to talk about karma, because you know the old saying, what goes around comes around.
That's right.
I believe that, don't you?
Absolutely. It's scientifically provable.
The big question is, again, why?
I think ultimately because we're all the same identity, and what we do to others, we're doing to ourselves. And there's a level of our being where we absolutely know that, and we will enforce it even to the point of destroying a physical body of our own incarnation if that's what we need to do to get the lesson. It can be heavy. The universe, the universe is not playing around. The universe wants you to be loving. And if you're not loving, it will smash out whatever is not love. And that's what we see in these cycles. The universe is giving us a class, and the class can be intense because we have more than one life to live. If you lose one body, you'll reincarnate and have another one. I have a whole chapter in the book on Jesus teaching reincarnation, tracing that lineage. So these things are real, and reincarnation is a commonality throughout almost all of the ancient spiritual teachings in the world.
Let's get into karma, big time, when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. What is, David, the law of karma?
Okay. The law of karma is essentially what you said before the break. What goes around comes around.
Okay.
And some people call it's a variant of the golden rule, I guess, except that instead of as you do unto others, so would you have them do unto you, it's like whatever you do to others is going to be done to you. And this is one of those things in which it's a nebulous spiritual concept right now. Some people believe it, and a lot of people don't. And if we had a more widespread public discussion about the reality that karma may exist, I think there would be a lot less crime, because what we have now is a very robust body of scholarship that I go through in the book. There's a few chapters just on reincarnation. The idea that some of the things that we do to others are too intense for us to experience those same things within one lifetime, and we will actually use reincarnation. And in the afterlife, there's a series of about 10 different experiences that we all go through that was charted out by Dr. Michael Newton. And I take my readers through all 10 of those things in great detail. And what he showed was that everybody has the same experiences when they die. Everybody goes through the same stuff, and he did this by regressive hypnosis.
Okay. Yeah.
And bringing people, even atheists, they all go through these same basic 10 stages. And what happens is when you're in the afterlife, you now are aware that your life on earth had a purpose and that you were trying to accomplish a specific level of spiritual understanding, that your whole reason for being was spiritual, that you were here to learn love and forgiveness. And any time that you haven't done that, you yourself have to plan out the next lifetime and work in, when you're ready for it, repeating the events that you created for others. And that would include torturing somebody, murdering somebody, all that kind of stuff. If you've tortured somebody, you're going to have to be tortured. If you murder somebody, you're going to have to be murdered. And apparently, in the afterlife, we all know this, and we know that we're bound to it, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, there's no question that your deeds and actions come back. They come back either to help you or haunt you.
But think about this, George. If the power structure here on Earth believes that they are a force of nature much like a wildfire, and that a force of nature is not beholden to karma, and they realize that if karma was real, they would be in really big trouble, they might be steering the narrative so that we don't ever talk about karma with any seriousness at all. There is no public consensus. Nobody is talking about it and saying, this karma thing seems to be real, and maybe we ought to look at quantum physics and relativity and discoveries of modern science that may help shed light on why this seems to be happening and what can we learn from it.
At what point, though, these power brokers, does karma bite them?
It happens again and again. You look in history and you see spectacular defeats. And in fact, in the book, I show that there was a cycle relationship between the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution. And the author of the book, who wrote it in 1980, predicted in 1980 that the Soviet Union would collapse in 1991 based on nothing but cycle science. And in that same relationship between France and Russia, he was able to identify that there was a major, if you will, Illuminati-type villain named Robespierre. And this guy created something called the Reign of Terror. It was government-sponsored terrorism against its own people. They starved the people. They bankrupted their economy. They cut off all the supply lines, so people had no food and no money, and they're starving to death. And then, because people were rioting from starving to death, they instituted terrorism as an official government policy to clamp down on dissent. What happened is, only about a month after this guy, Robespierre, stages a public event, the first time people had seen him, where he himself walked down the mount like Moses with the Ten Commandments on stone tablets, and he had these fake stone tablets that he was carrying. And he was trying to get people to join this new religion he was creating called the Cult of the Supreme Being. And it was a total Illuminati-type religion, in which he's saying terrorism is just, and it's the only way that the government can appropriately respond to the people. And about a month after he did that, he was put to death in a very gruesome beheading. And I won't go into all the details because it's nasty, but it's in the book. And then the same cycle repeats itself with Stalin, the great Soviet dictator who sent millions of people into concentration camps that were called gulags. Same thing as Hitler. And the timing in the two cycles between the poisoning death of Stalin, I show clear evidence he was poisoned. He did not die naturally. The poisoning of Stalin and the violent death of Robespierre are only less than a week apart in the two cycles. And so the cycles do not treat the nemesis nicely. If you're going to play the villain in this planetary game,
it's going to get you.
You're going to get it.
Maybe that's a good thing.
It is. It's good for everybody because ultimately every soul has to come into perfect balance with your own karmic bank account. You don't get to have a balance that's unpaid.
Do you have to be a believer in karma in order for it to work for you
because
or against you?
As I said, everybody who is hypnotized and goes into the afterlife state, and there are people doing this hypnotic regression. Linda Backman is one of them. She's got a new book coming out pretty soon. I've been reading through it right now, but there are people out there who do this. Leo Sprinkle, classic example of somebody who's done this.
Great guy.
Dr. Michael Newton's been doing it. So when you go into this state of consciousness, doesn't matter if you're a believer, non-believer, or indifferent, you will realize that in this level between lifetimes, you totally know there's an agenda of why you're here and what you're trying to learn. And again, the universe so wants you to be a nice person that it will basically stamp down anything that's not nice. And, I myself have admittedly had trouble with how it works because sometimes it seems very intense and over the top. But what apparently it all comes down to is that we are totally accountable for what we do and what we say. And in my life, it appears that I'm trying to balance out all my karma, and I'm just blowing it all out at once. And so anything that I do that's not in alignment, it just flies right up in my face right away. So when I have, if I stub my toe, if I cut my finger, any type of negative event that happens to me, and I've had a lot of people laugh at me and ridicule me and think that I'm crazy, but hardly anything that happens to me happens by accident. I know when these things happen, why they happened. I can see clearly the cause and effect between the thoughts that I had or the actions that I took against others and what then happens to me as a result of those thoughts and actions. It's very obvious to me.
Good thinking about this, David. That's why they call you the thinker.